وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولو ترى إذ يتوفى الذين كفروا الملائكة يضربون وجوههم وأدبارهم وذوقوا عذاب الحريق ذلك بما قدمت أيديكم وأن الله ليس بظلام للعبيد كدأب آل فرعون والذين من قبلهم كفروا بآيات الله فأخذهم الله بذنوبهم إن الله قوي شديد العقاب ذلك بأن الله لم يك مغيرا نعمة أنعمها على قوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وأن الله سميع عليم صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Surah Al-Anfal. Before we start the ayat that we recited today, from the last 2 or 3 ayat that we read, وَإِذْ زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ وَقَالَ لَا غَالِبَ لَكُمُ الْيَوْمِ, where we had said that the kuffar, as they were leaving the Makkah to fight Muslims, the place of Badr, Shaitan beautified what they were doing for them, made it beautiful, made it appear beautiful, and in fact Shaitan also put in their minds and hearts that they are the group that is on the right side of things. So to some extent they also had this sincerity in their heart. Because of the tricks of Shaitan, they had started believing that they are on the right path. And as we have said before, that Abu Jahl, before leaving the Baytullah, he held on to the wall of Baytullah, stuck his hand to put his hand onto the wall of Baytullah and said that whoever is on the right path, give them victory. So from this, ulama have said that only sincerity is not enough. Only sincerity, if somebody is very sincere at their heart, only sincerity is not enough. You have to follow what is the command of Allah, no matter if it conforms with what is in your heart or your sincerity or not. What is out there and what is apparent as the command of Allah, you have to listen to it and you have to stick to it. So if there is the Nabi of Allah who is presenting all the signs of logic to you, who is appealing to your logic, that he is the true Nabi of Allah, then you might have sincerity and still you might be deranged by the shaitan, led astray by the shaitan. So only sincerity is not enough. Obedience is also necessary, and sometimes people may have sincerity but they will still be led astray. Now the ayat today, وَلَوْ تَرَى يَتَوَفَّى الَّذِينَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if you were able to see. So of course the meaning here is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not able to see, but only if he was able to see, he would have seen that as يَتَوَفَّى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, the souls were being pulled away or returned from the bodies of the kuffar. الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَضْرِبُونَ وُجُوهَهُمْ وَأَدْبَارَهُم, you would have seen angels hitting their faces and their backs. And it comes in hadith that angels at the time of the death of a kafir, they come with iron maces and whips of fire, and they crack those whips on their backs and hit their heads and faces and their backs with those maces. So it's a very painful death when they are condemned to death, these kuffar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. And this also applies to, in particular, the kuffar, in particular here, the kuffar of Badr, that they had made this dua that whoever is on the righteous path, give them victory, and now they are in the battlefield and angels are coming and hitting them and snatching their souls away, and also saying to them, وَذُوقُوا عَذَابَ الْحَرِيقِ ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. So the angels are saying to them, taste the punishment of the flaming fire. So not only is this punishment, but further punishment, they would give them the news of further punishment right at their time of death. So this was a punishment right at the time of their death. It was a punishment on their bodies, and it is a punishment on their souls, that they are told scary news of the future. So they die a very painful death. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Every kafir, ulama have written that this happens to every kafir at the time of death. But walau tara, if only were you able to see. And we are not able to see, because if everybody is able to see, the wretched end of kuffar, then there is no test. Everybody would be able to see that what's the right path and what's the wrong path, and that these kuffar are not on the right path. The test is that we believe in the unseen. So these are things of the ghaib. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, out of His mercy, told us about these things. And ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ, this is all because ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ, it's all because of what you have sent forth, what you have earned yourself by your own hands. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ, Allah is not the one to be, Allah is not cruel to His servants. لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ, He does not do dhulm on His ibad, His slaves, His servants. So all of this was earned consciously by the kuffar themselves. كَدَأْبِ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ, as is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَدَأْبِ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ, the way of the people of Fir'aun, وَالَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, and those before them. What did they do? كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ, they rejected the signs of Allah. فَأَخَذَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِذُنُوبِهِمْ, so Allah seized them for their sins. إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَوِيٌّ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ, surely Allah is strong and severe in punishment. So these people, these kuffar, they know the stories from the past, and even such powerful, apparently such strong kings of the world who had armies and armies and basically virtually everything at their disposal, is still, what was their end? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them a painful death full of punishment. Allah. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مُغَيِّرًا نِعْمَةً أَنْعَمَهَا. A great principle is given here, is that all of this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change a favor ala qawmin, upon a nation, that He has conferred upon, hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim, until and unless they change it themselves. So what is the meaning of this? What came first, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or our good deeds? The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the universal principle and the universal way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with everyone, that without asking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them in ahsani taqweem, in the best of shapes, in the best of forms. Allah gave them the best of capacities. Allah gave them intellect to understand everything. Allah not only left the matter to their intellect, but also kept so many signs outside of them and within them, that they would see and they would ponder, and they would, if they were not biased, they would arrive at this conclusion that Allah is one, and they have to listen to the prophets that Allah is sending them. But Allah did not only leave it at that, but to warn them and to tell them in words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets to show them examples that this is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They kept on persuading them to come to the path of Allah. So all of these are mercies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that nobody asked for, but Allah did to us. So first came the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but what did people do with that mercy? What did people do with this bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In this, the Quraysh and the Fir'aun are kind of the same. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought the example of Fir'aun, that these people, Allah did them such a great blessing. Even on their treachery, Allah sent a prophet among them who would convince them, who would try to persuade them, present all the logic before them that would attract them to the right path of Allah. But what did they do? They further increased in their disobedience and started to harm the Nabi. And this is what the kuffar of Makkah were doing as well, that this great blessing of a prophet coming in you, and it is written in books of history, Hazrat has quoted here, that only 4 or 5 generations or 6 generations before the Prophet ﷺ, the grandfather of the third grandfather, this is how it is written. So it's just basically 5 or 6 steps of the ladder in the family tree of the Prophet ﷺ. Kilab bin Marrah, this person, there is name in there. In the time of this person, who was the leader of the Quraysh, these people were strictly on wahdaniyat, on the oneness of Allah and the deen of Sayyidina Ibrahim ala nabiyina alayhi salatu wassalam, and they did not do they were not polytheists. In the future generations, in these 5 or 6 generations, they started to develop things of shirk and polytheism. In fact, it is written that their religious leaders would every Friday gather them and give them a sermon about the oneness of Allah, and telling them that there is going to be a prophet. Allah has promised a final prophet who would come in our family, and when that prophet comes, we will have to listen to him, and our deliverance will only be dependent on listening to that prophet. And those who do not listen to the prophet will gain the wrath of Allah. These were the teachings in only 4 or 5 generations before in the Quraysh. So this was a great blessing, and they had good akhlaq. They would they would take care of their family. This was a feature of the Arab people of that time, that they would take care and fight and stand for their family, and they would serve the guests when they would come. But when the Prophet ﷺ came and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was further increased upon them, what did they do with that bounty? They, na'uzu billah, turned against their own family. The Prophet ﷺ was part of their family. They turned against their own people. Most of the Muslims were Qurayshi people. Even if a Muslim was Qurayshi, was part of Quraysh, they would turn against him. They used to serve the people who would come to the house of Allah and take care of them. But when these Muslims would go to the masjid to pray, the house of Allah, they would turn against them and try to fight them and beat them. Na'uzu billah. So this is the change that they brought their own selves in their state. And this is the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the state of a nation until they change it themselves. What does this mean? That the mercy of Allah, the bounty of Allah is there. The people change their ways, and what they do with that bounty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on that, changes His bounty. So the bounty is snatched away from such people who change their ways after being in a state of bounty. Sometimes people try to apply this, that unless and until, the meaning of this ayah they try to take, that unless and until you do something try to apply it to the worldly needs, that unless and until you work for something, Allah is not also going to change your days, that Allah is not going to give you money or not going to change your days. The meaning of the ayat is that the state of bounty that Allah has kept you in to begin with, you become transgressors, and then Allah changes that state of bounty. Unless you do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also keeps on giving bounties upon bounties. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearing, all knowing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from going astray ever. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma ja'alna min ahli